good afternoon. Many years ago, I've delivered a lecture on Said Zahari, yeah, in comparison to another Singapore Malay literati by the name of Muhammad Arif Ahmad, yeah, one who is the mainstream and one who is relegated and not known. Yeah? Myself, yeah, I'm born, raised here, educated here. Nobody mentioned about Said Zahari until one day I met Cikgu Latif Muhammad. Yeah? So Cikgu Latif told me about this man, you know, and suddenly it created kind of interest, and I wanted to know more because my interest is actually on the Malay Indonesian intelligentsia, yeah? How they participate in not only politics but in the cultural domain, yeah, to fight for rights, to fight for kind of maruah, we call it dignity, to fight for social justice, right? Be it in, well, party politics or in the cultural domain. Right? So in that sense that politics and poetics comes together. And this fits very well with these poems, the collection of these poems. Yeah? All right, let me just go through very quickly. I have about like 15 minutes, 20 minutes. I'll go very fast. Yeah, not to worry. This is not literature lecture. There's no such thing as technical, you know, things, right? Just enjoy, I think, some of his utterance. And I just do the general mapping to make sense of this collection. Let's begin with what Said Zahari has to say. I mean, he was a journalist, right? So you can see the kind of stand that he makes. Right? I mean, if you are a teacher, you have to make a stand. If you're a historian, you have to make a stand. If you're a journalist, you have to make a stand. I'm sure even if you're a politician, you have to make a stand, right? Nobody can say, oh, I'm neutral, right? Anyone who says that I'm neutral, something is wrong, right? So here, Said Zahari as a journalist says this. Journalists had to play the role of a watchdog of the government to make sure that we represent public opinion. We represent the thinking of the people. We offer criticism to the government in the interests of the people. We protect the interests of the people through our writing. You know very well what's our condition today, right? There are, of course, researchers who are not comfortable with taking position today, right? As if like the moment you take a position, you're a pariah, right? But in the ideals of anti-colonial movement, they have to take a position, right? So this is where Said Zahari come from, and that's the context of it. So what is this anthology about, right? So we have two sections. The first is the 1973 edition, yeah, which was, I think, edited by Dr. Raja Kumar, Usman Awang, yeah, and I think also Syed Hussein Ali, and including Adiba Amin. Very interesting lady too. 5 poems, 12 English, and then now we have 55 Malay poems translated into English. It's quite interesting here, yeah. So, but I think the translation do justice in that sense, right? I mean, best we can read in Malay, but well, translation is the best way, yeah, at least to know what Said Zahari think about. He wrote without pretension to be sage poet, sastrawan. That's not his brand, right? A journalist, public intellectual, he used the poetic medium to express himself. Yeah. All right. So this is where, at least about the book. And first of all, I think let's read what he says about why I write poetry. The last two lines: "At the devils whose reign will not be forever." Consistently in his repertoire, he is not a writer of pessimism. Always this, you know, the will to fight, and one day it will come. That kind of idealism is, you know, what we need, right? Word must be harnessed for struggle and victory, not for flight, defeat, and pessimism, right? Unfortunately, many of us in the condition of oppression, right? The condition of sort of injustices, we tend to be like, oh, well, we can't do anymore, right? This is the system. That kind of pessimism is not for Said Zahari, right? And of course, his friends too, like Usman Awang. If you know, you read Usman Awang well, you can see, I think they are brothers in arms, I would say, right? All right. So this is a poem that he wrote, Jeritan, or a cry, translated, 1963, but he didn't put the month. If it's September 63, then it's formation of Malaysia, right? But if it's earlier, maybe I think during the time of struggle. I think it's also got to do with the independence of Singapore through Malaysia, yeah? It's not the doomsday that's coming, that's the flame of struggle burning brighter, consuming all evil and oppression. A cry that brings me 1,000 strength, a new spirit to my life from the voice of the beloved people. A very strong kind of socialistic sentiment all throughout his poem, right? Compared to the intelligentsia of the day, some of them who played along the kind of ethno-nationalism, right? One who like more class, kind of like agitation, class-oriented struggle, right? And of course, a smaller pocket of more like kind of Islamists, very tiny minority, which later on, after the 80s, they were, much more vocal. But this group is interesting. Usman Awang and the friends, the left, or lack of better term, we call it the leftists, yeah? They are the tiny breed, right? Very vocal, powerful work, but along the way, the narrative, no mention of that, right? So as a teacher of literature, I mean, it's my job, right? Right? To say, well, there's always the right, there's always the left, there's always the center, and there's always underground and above the ground, right? Whatever it is, right? So it's interesting to see through literature, we are also studying social history, right? And a movement of people expressing not through just political parties, but through cultural domains. Yeah? So this is quite interesting when he says anti-national, right? And so they were branded like, no, you all are not patriotic people. You say, yeah, if that anti-national means what? It refers to anti-colonialism, anti-imperialism, and anti-feudalism. If that's by definition, I'll agree. Otherwise, I reject your branding of anti-national. Yeah? So as a journalist, he needed to write, to pen his thoughts, observation, and even his emotion. He's a journalist, so he needs to channel his writing. Imagine, right? I mean, you'll be detained, and what else you can do, right? Writing is the best way for him to escape from the pain, yeah, of this isolation. So, also I will read that he wrote this as a way to maintain his mental sanity and sobriety. All right, so this is, by penning his thought, he wanted to be the witness to the struggle and commitment. Yeah? Witnessing is important. I think in this imagination of the power of politics and poetics, commitment, of course, is fundamental, but witnessing the very struggle is important. Not just documenting, observing, but also envisioning that something better could be unraveled. Okay? Altogether, be brave in facing the fight, advance, steady, advance, chest out, head held high, scale to the summit, dignity must be reclaimed. Imagine, if we are in that place of four walls, he still have that, the power, right, to call, no defeat, right? Well, someone can just dismiss, these are idealism. So what? Idealism is the very thing that we need, right? The moment we are defeated by the constraint of the four walls, we can't do anything. At least power of words must be the witness of the struggle. So actually, when I was invited here, it was just like a few days ago, you emailed to me, you called me, William. So it was midst of Hari Raya, and then also, marking, all the admin works, yeah. But I tell myself, no, I just finished one session this morning, and later on I have another session. So you can imagine, right? I also want to be part of the struggle, right? Struggle in that sense, please, yeah? Struggle in the domain of teaching, yeah? So just now when you saw that NUS, no way that I'm representing NUS, right? That's my research assistant, standard, all the PowerPoint slides with NUS logo, yeah? So some of you might, what's that big institution is just formality, okay? All right, So in no way that I'm representing my campus, right? But I take pride that I'm teaching at the Department of Malay Studies, and this is my reading. Okay. All right. So his poem generally have a strong social themes. We know that without the need to philosophize. There's no place for that. Yeah. I think if someone wants to read that, I think it's a misreading. Right? Because I mean, nothing wrong with philosophy, right? But he's a man of praxis, I would say, more of action, think critically, and while loaded with sentiment against politics of power, he was still be able to retain poetic expression. In other words, it was not that vulgar or not that too crude in expressing it. There is a sentiment, especially if you read Malay. And I think because of his close affinity with, imagine, yeah, he was in the same office with Usman Awang, Grace Mas, who else? A. Samad Ismail, right? So all these are, big gunners, main ones, if you read their literary works, you can tell the kind of, poetics that they are, familiar with. So Said Zahari was within that circle, yeah? And he was able to balance his personal expressions with those of social commitment. Okay? And these are best that this collection of poems be read side by side with the 3 memoirs, right? I'm sure no, all right, we don't have any more copies to be sold, right? Go and check out. It's all translated into English already, right? Or maybe we have another lecture in future about that, right? Yeah. Yes, it's my pleasure, because the other time I made comparison with Muhammad Arif Ahmad, but this time around just one lecture on Arif. But that's require a little bit of homework because 3 memoirs is not easy. Okay. All right. Anyway, so he expressed his commitment to socialism. This is something that my student or younger ones, the moment they hear socialism, they get a bit scared. This one, government, this one ISA, that kind of thing. But socialism it's the kind of another orientation, right? During that time, right? Even if you look at PAP document, right? There are publication on ke arah socialisme. It's available at NUS library. You can just read them. PAP socialisme, right? So it was a common expression at that time, right? So he wrote this Lagu Rakyat, the songs of the people. Socialism is my soul. Serving the people is my purpose. Come friends, come comrades. Plant the grand plant of socialism. On every land around the world, socialism is my life, and so on and so forth, right? So in that sense, when I read this, yeah, we can relate that kind of enunciation and denunciation. This is kind of biblical expression. Oh yeah, Said Zahari di Tegah masuk. He was prohibited from entering Malaya. This is by Tengku. Perintah Tengku means Tengku Abdul Rahman. Right? So when he came to Singapore to do some reports, and then after he was not allowed to return back to Kuala Lumpur because his main office was in Kuala Lumpur. Right? So yeah, that's I said requires another lecture. So today I'm going the poetics, not the politics. Okay, all right. So if you see, this is the first one that I mentioned just now about the commitment to socialism. The second, we can make sense of his moral intellectual position, the parasitical nature of oppression. You're familiar with socialist Marxist work? These are some common idioms that have been expressed, right? Younger ones, they say, hey, this one communist, right? Yeah, but if you read major writers of the world, be it Africa, Latin America, right? Even in the West, these are common expression, part and a parcel of human struggle against any kind of injustices. Yeah, and it says only struggle alone can vanquish misery. That's a commitment. The camaraderie with the struggle with fellow third worldies. This is where I think about 3 or 4 poems dedicated on the Vietnam War. Uncle Ho, which means Ho Chi Minh, right? Indo-Chinese Patriots with Vietnam, another poem. Right? Why is that so? That was actually the middle when he was incarcerated. It was the middle of Vietnam War. So a man, a journalist who knows that something wrong in the war in Southeast Asia. My generation, we grew up, Viet Cong is the bad guy. Is that so? Right? So, well, to him, no. Imperialism is the bad guy, not Viet Cong. Yeah? All right, so he missed, and this is another part of it, he always kind of missed the voice of the common people, the rakyat. Yeah? So rakyat is a bit difficult to translate. Right? It's not masses, it's not just common public, it's the rakyat can also mean, yeah, one who in the state of wretchedness, right? Okay? Depending on who define it. I think to him, that's the case. The plight and struggle of the rakyat, he see the people, not in ethnic terms, see, but their socio-economic position. This is actually, you can find in Usman Awang too. Yeah? And when I think when he was in prison, he saw that, of course, you know that he worked in a Malay-speaking environment, right? And he has that, of course, a socialistic outlook, like layer for Malayans, that kind of thing. But when he was in the prison, I could suspect that he saw a more variety of Malaya, right? He saw nikmatilah semua. So imagine, a Malay person with Nanta group, right? So he says, look, how lucky to have lined up bridges that cross to appeal of many cultures. Why love only one? That's a reminder, right, of those who took the path of mono-cultural or ethno-cultural path. To him, that should not be. That brings to a dead end. Yet again, a name caused strife. Yet again, the sound of words evoke pride. What is in a name? What's the wisdom is decreed from the sound of words? Don't draw the blinds to the heart's window. Let the cool, crisp breeze blow in. Do not reduce a world readily tiny, but embrace all the fairies of serenity, i.e. plurality, right? Couched in a very poetic way. This is again akin to Usman Awang, his beloved friend. Harnessing literature and culture for creativity and criticality. Yeah, this is long before this fashionable Gramsci reading, right? Of using cultural domain, yeah, as part of the struggle. I think men like him, Pramudia, right, friends in Indonesia, and even Ho Chi Minh, yeah, they have used literature as part and parcel to garner, to mobilize imagination for social justice. And he wrote about this pantun. It's not really a pantun in traditional form, but he used quite strategically here, right? Pantun is a very popular quatrain, right? Yeah, many of us will know, will be able to exchange pantun. But he used that poetic form in order to impress upon the idea that he wants to say, right? I just read the forceful line, yeah? Every creation reflects thought. Every thought is stated to a teaching. Every teaching nurtures a cohort. Every cohort searches for victory, right? If you read the Malay version, it is rhythmic, really like a pantun, right? So, I think this is a kind of what? Emancipative pantun. So this is not like the kind of, pantun for Dondang Sayang, yeah. This is pantun for us to be, feel emancipated, yeah. All right, and poetry as imagination for struggle as such, right? They are quite consistently that he built up his theme. Literature's purpose and the role of poetry. Let's see what he say about the literature purpose. This one reminds us what the Russian revolutionaries, even Mao, yeah, name it. They have used literature in order to mobilize those things. We write prose, we write poetry. They destined to be the earth from which to sprout. Is the courage alone, without considering who will be exalted and who will be stormed. We write prose, we write poetry. Do not think we are spared from either of their outcomes. If we do not consciously hold high our virtuous service, then certainly without realizing we become destroyers of deeds. In other words, he was actually also lamenting, right, those who have called themselves sastrawan, the literati, but are more interested with words for what? For personal contemplation, right? He says that literature has a purpose. Literature is not taman-taman indah, which is, a garden of beauty, right? Where you exalt beauty. No, literature is part and parcel of that societal struggle. And today, those kind of things, but don't, especially, this postmodern mambo jumbo, right? Everything is relative, you cannot be committed, and so on and so forth. I think we need to come back again to look at what is this struggle. He accords the role of poetry especially. I still believe poetry has the mind of a dragon. Poetry can weaken and inject forces that enliven. It can destroy as it can elevate itself into a weapon. That is poetry in the hands that will to whom it differs. So it depends, right? Poetry alone could not promise anything, but the poet who move with history, a poet that have a common sentiment with the struggle of the people, right? If you look at big writers from Southeast Asia, be it from Pram, Mokhtar Lubis, and the rest, yeah, many more. Most of them struggle via literature, as I repeated. Yeah? All right. So from his poem, there are 4 dimensions that we can read. This is my reading. First, a fighter, a dissenter who was clamoring, affirming, and dissenting. Yeah? That's his position. Yeah? Political position and also poetic position. 2, a loving family man. Yeah? Very touching, especially those poems on his some family, yeah? Wife, son and daughter, yeah? And on his other siblings. Yeah? Personal, homocultural, if there's a word, such word exists, yeah? Where his verse encapsulates his thoughts on politics, literature, culture, and history. So he's actually a man of vast reading too, I would say. Right? He has that interest. A human persona with frailties and strengths. Yeah. So when you read, it's not just about wanting to fight. It also expresses his, sometimes he has some doubts. He feels down. It's only human anyway, right? But he is not shy to express those. But he always ends up not in pessimism. That's one thing about him. Although he tells personally about his tribulation, but he's not giving up. Yeah. All right. So the need to struggle for freedom, you know very well that freedom is not a grace or endowment. It is a commitment and action that demands a struggle, even sacrifices, right? His journalistic work, his political work, right? And in prison, 17 years of his writing itself. And later on, post-prison period where he's writing a memoir, right? He gives workshop and so on and talks, that and part and parcel of that struggle. Fear must be battled against. He says that fear is the one that you have to, because of us, because we don't want to speak. We don't even want to read and think because we fear, right? Imagine, Said Zahari, tak mau pegang, scared, But why? Nobody control, right? I mean, nobody said, you cannot read. There's nobody say that, right? It's just that we fear of things. Of course, we must be responsible of when we utter, right? When we share and so on. He was aware that he suffered is nothing compared to the suffering of the people. He admitted that. He wrote, well, this mental torture that I face is nothing to the kind of plight of the rakyat out there. Right? So there are frequent expression of camaraderie with his friends and colleagues in the act of clamoring freedom and independence. There are some friends who I think fell sick and those who released early, right? So he kind of like expressing those sentiments. In the course of history that needs to be shaped, it is the course of history that needs to be shaped. We should be part of history to shape it, to change it. Just like what the famous Marx dictum, right? Philosopher is not just about to theorize the world, but to change the world. Yes, right? So this is what he has to say. Jalan Sejarah, this is in the first edition. Whatever name is given to suffering, its entire meaning is misery. Whatever the race or worker or peasant, all grabs the hammer and wield the changkul, the whole, yeah? Wherever on earth they be, they are one race, one name, and so on and so forth. Yeah? So if let's say we do survey, yeah? We do survey kind of literary expression. if you can find something like this of this type, actually you'll be very surprised, right? Rarely any more of this type is. So sometimes when I teach my class, right? Students are like, where these people come from? Yeah, because they are divorced from the struggle, the history of anti-colonial struggle, right? Because colonial is seen as, well, you know, they come, they make us happy, come together, and then they leave, we also happy, everything is happy, right? And then suddenly one theory came to campus, post-colonial. Wow, they think they, you know, they feel good, you know, wow, this theory post-colonial and so on. But post-colonial is not anti-colonial. Very interesting, right? It is produced in Western centers, but not from here, right? We should be the one formulating the theories of anti-colonialism because we face it. Yeah, of course, I born in the 70s, yes? So I don't face it, but, you know, the tradition that I inherited, yeah, the struggle that I inherited, yeah? So this is what he has to say, and you look at the last line, burning all the enemies of the people, brightening the final victory. Again, last line always, you know, he wind up with a kind of like a fighting spirit, no pessimism, right? So I think, you know, imagine, yeah, if someone who is a fighter but having a pessimistic sentiment, right? It's a self-defeating project, right? Interestingly, yeah, he noted, based on 1969 racial riot, it was primarily seen as the hidden hands, the title of a poem. It is the elite forces working for imperialistic and vested interests to retain power, using racial and religious card to prop up their power. You know very well, right? I mean, those in history, it's not the ethnic relation, tense ethnic relation between Chinese and Malays, right? There must be some hidden hands that weren't, right? And you know, some readings were stated that it was actually UMNO was the one that I'm going to Malaysia this Monday, so I wouldn't want to say much. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, one thing about him, so he is contemplative yet this worldly. I use Edward Said's this worldly. Edward Said made two comparisons. This worldly mean one to confront, engage with the disorder of life, yeah, the tribulation of life, the struggle of life here, rather than otherworldly. Normally, when we see otherworldly means religious. No, otherworldly could be this high theory, you know, high philosophy. Otherworldly, they are not of this world, right? Sometimes when you read them, you don't know where are they actually, right? That's otherworldly to Edward Said. So in his state of contemplation, he was never otherworldly. I use that from Said. He never pretend to probe inner self. He's not like mystic who suddenly wants to write, you know, I want to find the light above the light. You know, it's not. He wants to write for the suffering of the people. Because today there is a tendency, right? The higher you go, you want to go the higher light, and you forget the downtrodden darkness, right? So truly socialist, right? Very secular in this sense. Yeah. And he says about life and death. Look at this. Yeah. Isn't death that must be pondered? It isn't death that must be pondered, but life. Especially if you are familiar with Malay Indonesian parlance, right? Always the afterworld, the afterlife is given premium rather than today. So he departed from all his friends. No, not to say that he's irreligious, no, right? But his position. Death is a conclusion while life is an inception that must be nurtured and fought for, not simply left either, right? So here again, I think this is something which a good point for us to be reminded. A poet dissented at work. These are some other notes that maybe, you know, there are some pages that I noted here that you can take note. Life needs intensity of meaning, but not tenseness of anxiety. This is in mystery, right? I think he tried to understand what's the meaning of mystery. The mystery is not that other things. The mystery is to unravel what we have a problem today. Yeah. Lamenting his state of affairs, longing to be feared, which could only afford via dreams. He was thinking about Changi village, not Changi village, Changi beach, right? Already the prison made the Changi college, All memories that make him think about the future, avoid moralizing, nor expressing moral panic, which I think many of poets today tend to do this, right? Moralizing means, the fall of civilization means girls and boys start holding hands each other. That kind of moralizing. To them, no. The destruction of civilization is injustices that have prevented any kind of social mobility of the peasants and fishermen. That is the corrupt part of civilization, not girls and boys holding hands together. Yeah. All right. So a feature not uncommon, as I mentioned, amongst the learned group who concern more on the mention of identity, recognition than centrality of resource distribution. I think this is, quite in Marx's discourse, yeah, between two things that normally people fail to grapple. Politics of identity, we give premium, and politics of redistribution, which we don't want to talk today. Right? So with this mumbo jumbo, postmodern, post-colonial, we talk about politics of identity, but we don't want to talk about politics of redistribution. Here, the elders during this time, we can consider him as elders now, right? Yeah, were concerned on issues of redistribution, not on identity. Nowhere. He never replied whether I'm a Malay, whether I'm a Muslim, He didn't do that. But to him, most importantly is the plight of the people. Right? Today, almost, I will say that if you find a poem of this type, it's one rare, but most of the poems is all about identity. We have been told that identity is the ultimate destiny. Right? Imagine, if you just think that you are Chinese, I just think you're Malay, we won't be coming here today, right? We go beyond that identity, isn't it so? Right? All right. So loving and affectionate personality, his vigor in expressing his commitment, he too, as a human, expressed his moment of regret and sorry. This is the poem that Duri dan Api, Thorn and Fire, when about his family. Okay? He lost his family. Yeah? A loving husband, yeah, in fact, very intimate in his words. Wedding anniversary, he has no qualms to express his affection and love to his wife. This is, some men would not be comfortable, expressing love for wife, less macho, right? But no, to him, he expressed that. You're very gentleman in this. Yeah? I mean, how many of us who want to write poem for our wife or for our husband, right? For especially husband to wife, lah. Okay. On the 45th birthday, right, he felt a heavy weight of isolation, only human, a fractures of feeling, possibly after the visit of his wife or loved ones. Could be, I think the wife, or he didn't say, right? The fractured feelings. This is, if only we have more time, we can do close reading in this class, right? Not class, session. Yeah. Yeah, so in the spirit of Selamat Hari Raya, yeah, there are about few Selamat Hari Raya poems in this collection, right? Among others, this is the one. But even Hari Raya is not like Maaf Zahir Batin, it's not about that. Even Hari Raya, he used it as part of, don't be sad, right? Be sad because, it shouldn't be sad because we should celebrate that the struggle is part and parcel that we have been entrusted. If you see my tears run freely, it's not because we are apart, far from it. Never to wallow in sorrow, but because we are rightfully delighted to wave the banner of noble struggle. Wasn't it thousands of connivance and hundreds of deceitful treachery, which we crush one by one, and thousands of trials for the heart, and we have not overcome them all. Can you imagine, Hari Raya, you write like this to your wife, abang, all right, right? I'm sure the wife also, you see, could also have that kind of sentiment. It's okay, you suffer, but we witness this struggle. Right? So you can extend this even Christmas, Chinese New Year, and so on, right? I mean, how many people wants to write this way, right? Solidarity and dignity. This is another important. Yeah. So in 1975, so his friends in the prison celebrated his birthday. And one thing about him is not ego, no? Oh, people celebrate birthday for me. No. he saw the celebration of the birthday as not just a personal gift, but one which he felt solidarity with the rest. You see, this man, very strange, right? Even his personal, come together, right? And he says that, and make him more committed to this idealism, right? He's a loving friend to Usman Awang, to his fellow detainees. This is Usman Awang, yeah? Usman Awang's poems are fabulous poems. So most of his writings are available in English and Mandarin too, right? Take a look, yeah? So in his separation from his family, the long years of isolation, the deep silence, which allows him to have deep reflection to think about his condition. But in this isolation, at times tested with his estimation, it tested him. Right? I mean, as I mentioned, it's just only human to feel that way. That is only human, as I said, although prison never shattered him. Right? And that's what we can learn from this. To conclude, Pak Said, or Comrade Said, or Saudara Said, was imprisoned, but was never a broken man. In fact, he is a man of another strength, that gave to us. Two, his rights were taken away, but he would never succumb to compromising his dignity. Right? There must be some, if you're in detention, you can negotiate, blah, blah, blah. It happened to Said Hussein Ali, it happened to Qasim Ahmad, right? In Aditya memoirs, there are certain people who, were freed because there's some kind of concession. Whatever document that you want to sign, and then you might be treated or released early. But not for this man, he stayed. He was not stayed, he was detained 17 years. In fact, the incarceration he deemed as part of the stages of his struggle. Poetry is a form of presence in history. He inscribed it to say that I exist in history. Imagine, friends, today we have lots of things happening, but we don't want to tell. We don't want to write. We don't want to make part of its discursive engagement. We just post in Facebook or we do IG. We think it's, right? Maybe it might be useful, which I don't know, right? But I think there must be something making the presence felt in history. It is also an ascent to poetics and politics. He wants to attain that, without which it could only mean silence and violence. Violence comes when silence is prolonged. Okay? And he refused to be. And this is the last from Pak Said. I will want to read the two versions. Title Malay version is Azam, right? Means resolution. It's a fair translation, right? Of course, I'll come back in English. Right? Jika kau punya nyawa, matamu melihat, mulutmu bersuara. Alangkah beruntungnya kau berdiri menjadi saksi. Betapa remuk dada, sunyi mencengkam jiwa, demikian lama. Dan berapa lama lagi pikiran 1000 soalan. Kemarin telah kau dengar rungutku. Semalam kau dengar rayuan. Hari ini kau lihat kebencianku. Dan tunggulah. Esok ketika aku bertindak. Keputusan telah kubuat, keazaman telah kupahat. Kekejaman ini, kejahatan ini tidak bisa lagi dibiarkan. Akan kutentang dengan seluruh kekuatan. If you have a soul, your eyes can see, your mouth can speak. How advantageous to me your stand as witness. Such broken-hearted silence seizes life for so long. And how much longer? 1,000 questions in my thoughts. The day before you heard my protest. Yesterday, you heard my appeal. Today, you see my hatred and wait for tomorrow when I shall act. My decision has been made. A resolve has been chiseled. This cruelty, this evil can no longer be allowed. I shall oppose it with all my strength. On that note, thank you. Terima kasih. One is, of course, literature is, social sciences already in the lowest ebb, right? Within social sciences and humanities, literature is the last, actually, right? And more so, another last part is Malay literature, like, yeah, right? So you can see double, yeah. So that's something which is, how do you overcome this? I think you must be creative in your curriculum planning in that sense, right? You need to be always updated, yeah, and not to be treating text as just a text. A text is a living memory. A text is documentation, yeah? Literary text. A text is part and parcel of human struggle. Because the moment you treat it as just simply a text, then you start going into, how you apply this theory into that particular text. It will make it dull, students are not interested, and they don't gain anything. And it's not their fault also to hate literature, right? Because I think the way in which we have approached literature, we have used it as a technical text, not as a humanistic struggle. We need to redefine what literature is all about, right? I think, yeah. But of course, students over time, yeah, they're quite scared of things politics. So politics being defined always about, to unseat the government. No, politics means relations of power, right? Between male and female, there's relations of power, right? Between the people and the ruling elite, there's relations of power, right? Between we and the market, there's relations of power, right? So we need to tell, well, in this world, there are these dynamics working, right? I think if you phrase it that way, students shouldn't be scared, right? So it takes some effort just to convince them, right? To think about politics and politics won't send you to jail or won't send you to hell, right? Okay.
Have you been able to teach such poetry?
Yes, I use this in class, okay. and that's why normally when I have that first page NUS, this is part and parcel of what we teach.
So, with no disrespect to Said, do you consider his poems in Malay of sufficient quality?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I would say that when I first read, I said, really, journalists? Because he reminds me of Usman Awang, Cikgu Latif, an Indonesian, maybe like people like, those Lekra groups, right? I mean, Pram and Mokhtar Lubis normally write in prose, not in verse, yeah. But if only Said could have explored more on short stories, then we can see how he stretches poetic reading, right? I mean, his literary imagination. But in terms of his diction, in terms of allegory use, I think he's able to articulate those. I would say that he belongs to just below maybe Masuri as yeah, because Masuri is one of the most articulative, yeah, and so. Except Masuri went into humanism without contestation. This is different. Whereas this man, humanism, socialism with contestation. So that's a plus for him.
And that's why he got the cultural medallion now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I wanted to share this a poem that I thought, A Decade of Longing, written August 1971. I was only a 5-day baby, yeah, at Macpherson Estate, right? So this line, I think is very personal to me. I of course, no way that I'm telling that I wrote for me, no, yeah, but yeah, just 5 days, yeah, I was born, yeah. And he says this, at that time, if I may read, yeah, page 181 if you have the book. At the same time, I miss the cries of babies seeking milk, the shouts of people yearning for land to harvest tapioca as life's reward. I miss the sight of those toiling and drenched in sweat, seeking livelihood in bounties that bravely enough, a life of survival from hand to mouth. I live at Macpherson Estate, Circuit Road. Yeah. The block still stands until today. My parents' generation that came from Malacca, right? And it was a tough life. Basically, there was poor nutrition on a part of my mom. So she told me when I was born in that particular block, you know, the baby with lots of bubbles, white bubbles, because she has been eating tapioca, right? So when I read this, oh man, yeah, it's like he was, I could relate, you know, the kind of thing that he wanted to document. Although he might be writing this for peasants, yeah, but we struggle, and I was a sick baby for many years, yeah, because of that poor nutrition. Yeah. Okay, then I think that's about the decade of longing that he wants to share. It's very personal to me, lah. A bit, yeah.
I follow with a personal story of Said. So I got to know Said in 1980 thereabouts because I was with the Times Group, and he was employed after his release with Asian Research Bulletin. And my subsequent boss happened to be his boss also. So we were often together. So we had a certain close relationship. So much so that this after he went back to Malaysia and lived in, what's it? Not Subang Jaya, but Shah Alam. Yeah. He gave us a request when my husband and I traveled down from Ipoh. And we wanted to meet him. He gave us a request and we asked, what would you like to eat? We bring something for you. The Ipoh salted chicken. We bought 2 boxes. And when we reached his home, can you imagine he just walked straight away, tucked in with his bare hands. No, that was Said to me. All the years that I've known him, Said was, first of all, a great human being. He was not a Malay, not a Muslim, not a whatever. He was just a human being. And he could relate to everyone on that level. And when I read his poems again, I said, I wish he were here to read for us. And so I urge all those who can, record your own voices, please. Even if you do not want to speak in public, it's okay. Just record into a handphone. Anything you want to say, something, to leave a trace for history, you know, of how a person actually looked, sounded, and, well, left for us your thoughts or your pictures, whatever. And Said's, I think, best memory for us was his Hari Raya parties. He was so generous, he and his wife. They always gave us a beautiful spread. Yeah, those of us who had the opportunity to join them. And Said to me was the true Malayan. And I, in great humility, would like to call myself a Malayan too, anytime. Not a Singaporean, not a Malaysian. First of all, a human being, of course, then a Malayan. Why? It's the ethnicity that Azhar talked about. You know, it wasn't in him at all to see you as a person with a race. To him, you are just a person, right? Whether friend or foe, he'll still be very kind to you, even if it's a foe. He never cursed Lee Kuan Yew, you know, the conversations we had. Yeah, that's how I remember. He cursed the policies. Maybe he really disputed the methods used, but never on a personal note. So that's my memory. So we may not be able to read the Malay poems like Azhar did so nicely. Would anyone like to read any poem from the book? Because my husband Hofang, he suddenly had to go to hospital. So actually he had prepared this segment for civic reflection, meaning when we read a poem, when we hear a poem, what does it stir in yourself? You need not critique the poem. It's just what the poem stirs in you. We can try to do that, okay? So we can read less in white. We can still do that segment. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, so the title is Less in White. And it was written when he was escorted by his guards because he was during his imprisonment. He suffered from a torn meniscus in his knee. And so there was an entourage of guards to send him to Singapore General Hospital in 1968. So actually, I think this represented probably a lighter moment of his long, bleak years in prison. Bravely, she crossed the barrier, stretched out her hand, asking, "Do you feel better? Call me if you need anything." I could hardly believe my ears when she put the question, "Tell me of yourself. What's life like in prison?" Flat on my back, into her bright eyes looking, I was aware of my escorts, eyes fixed on her, ears straining. She wasn't deterred. One question after another, no question I mutter seemed enough for her. Soon I forgot that the pain was gnawing where a torn meniscus was removed that morning. Gone was my loneliness in the midst of many. I found friendliness in this land without democracy. How I wish I had asked her for her name, that brave, good-hearted lass in white. General Hospital, Singapore, July 1968.
Hello, everyone. The poem that very interesting to me is on the title, Hidden Hands, or Tangan-tangan yang tersembunyi. Maybe if you, okay, in page 116 and 117. So I read in Malay first. Tangan-tangan yang tersembunyi setelah kerusuhan perkauman di Kuala Lumpur. Sekali lagi, sejarah berulang kembali dengan kelakuan liar dalam zaman tamadun. Sekali lagi, tangan-tangan tersembunyi muncul, mencari darah si miskin dan si melarat. Sekali lagi, warna, bangsa, agama, dan bahasa menjadi mata pisau tajam digunakan mencucurkan darah. Itulah yang terjadi di setiap sudut bumi ini. Sebilangan kecil makan roti dan yang lain mengunyah pasir. Itulah yang terjadi. Sebilangan kecil berpakaian baldu, tidur di istana, yang lainnya berbogel, berasakan di gubuk-gubuk usang. Itulah yang terjadi, lalu muncullah tangan-tangan tersembunyi, mencucurkan darah si miskin untuk bertahan dalam kekuasaan. Mei 1969. So I read in English too. Hidden hands after racial riots in Kuala Lumpur. Once again, history repeats itself by savage deeds in a civilized age. Once again, hidden hands appear, seeking the blood of the poor and the rich. Once again, color, race, religion, and language become sharp blades to use in the carnage. It has happened in every corner of the earth, where the few eat bread and the rest eat sand. It has happened where the few, clothed in velvet, sleep in the palaces. The rest go naked, squeezed into sharks. It has happened, the hidden hands reappear, spilling the blood of the poor to cling on to power. May 1969. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
There's one poem, which is in English, actually, he wrote, The Pusillanimous Lackey. If any one of you can read in the sense of who is he referring to? I wish I could do interview, who is he referring to? Right? It's quite interesting if you know the insights here. Page 106, translated into Malay, Tali Barut Pengecut, but in English, Pusillanimous Lackey, which is the original poem written in English. Yeah. And it was written in May 1967. So I'm seeing ini bapa-bapa, ibu-ibu senior ni, all of you can read history better than me, right? So I was wondering, who could it be? Okay, I read, the English one, okay? Once before, 4 years ago, I was brought to this sunless place for a solitary life in a drab gray world. My world. A box of concrete with peephole. It had other names, dungeon, hell, torture chamber. 4 years ago, he threatened to put a bullet in my head, but squirmed when challenged, Pusillanimous Lackey. No more threats this time. Instead, freedom with humiliation. Recant, sell your soul for a freedom that's soulless. So he must be referring to that person, right? There isn't any way out. You either give in or you'll rot. Then fidgeting as I was firm, their defeat already confirmed. The bluff is caught. The mask is torn. They beat a retreat, leaving my box alone with me in it. So who could it be? Yeah, as you know, one of the way of reading literature is always to put things in context, right? And we need to verify some factual data, right? Not just about politics and politics, but also some factual data.
Thank you so much, Dr. Azhar.
Problem.
Please.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you. So we really like it that our friends in Malaysia, People's History Center, Pusat Sejarah Rakyat. So they did everything, collating, doing the layout, cover, and sent us the FA to print in Singapore. So we want to acknowledge the work of the People's History Center and thank them for this friendship. So the proceeds from this book will be shared with our Malaysian friends and whatever other arrangements they have. Do go to the table at the end. Those who are online, and if you pass on this news to other friends, you can buy this title and you get a free copy of Said's memorial book. Okay. So we are very, very thankful for everyone's participation. And before we end, William has something to say.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this session. And actually, we only had 1 week to prepare for this. That was because we saw the importance of this event and we wanted to do something about it. And 1 week for Dr. Azhar to prepare the slides and so on, we must give him another round of applause.